Would you rather have money or friends? At first glance, this question sounds almost silly, shallow, like something said casually in a bar conversation or during a relaxed chat among acquaintances. But if you pause for a few seconds and allow it to echo inside you, you'll realize it carries far more weight than it seems. Because in real life, this question appears disguised in daily decisions. Silent, small choices that, when added together, define entire destinies. It's not about money. It never was. It's about what you're willing to lose just to avoid admitting that you've already lost. Most people don't consciously choose to abandon friends, family, or meaningful relationships. They choose to persist in projects that no longer work, to persist in relationships that have already emptied out, to persist in dreams that quietly turn into prisons, all driven by one dangerous thought. I've already invested too much to quit now. This logic, which seems rational on the surface, is a deep emotional trap, one capable of imprisoning entire lives in cycles of frustration, exhaustion, and loneliness. This story is about that. About choices driven by fear instead of wisdom, about the invisible costs of not knowing when to walk away, about how love, friendship, and human connection are sacrificed on the altar of pride, and above all, about the exact moment when accepting a loss is not failure, but freedom. Michael Carter always believed that successful people were the ones who never gave up. From an early age, this idea shaped itself inside him like an absolute truth, almost a moral principle. He believed giving up was weakness, and stepping back meant admitting incompetence. He grew up hearing that winners endure more, work harder, and sacrifice everything if necessary. And Michael took that belief literally, without filters, without pauses, without questioning the emotional cost of that philosophy. He was intelligent, disciplined, and deeply committed to everything he did. Empathy existed in his heart, but it was buried beneath an armor of extreme responsibility. Michael believed that by giving up the present, he was securing a better future for everyone around him. At least, that's what he told himself every time he missed birthdays, canceled plans, avoided conversations, or let irreplaceable moments slip away. His best friend, Daniel Bruggs, had known Michael since their teenage years. They grew up together, failed together, dreamed together. Daniel was always the counterbalance. Where Michael saw goals, Daniel saw people. Where Michael saw numbers, Daniel saw stories. He believed in the power of kindness, in everyday gentleness, and human connections that hold someone together when everything falls apart. Still, Daniel never tried to force Michael to change. Respect always came before advice. When Michael decided to start his own business and invest everything he had and everything he didn't, Daniel was the first to support him, not with money, but with presence, listening, and genuine love. Michael promised it would be temporary, that everything would settle later. Promises made while staring at the future often sound convincing. The problem is, when the present starts charging emotional interest. The first months of the business were fueled by enthusiasm and adrenaline. Michael woke up early, slept little, and fed himself with the belief that every sacrifice was temporary. But slowly, the numbers stopped adding up. Small losses appeared, followed by optimistic justifications. "It's just the beginning," he said. "Every business goes through this." And so, every loss was reframed as part of the journey, never as a real warning. The problem wasn't making mistakes. It was persisting without evaluating. Michael invested more money, more time, and more emotional energy, trying to recover what was already lost. The sunk cost fallacy settled in quietly. Without asking permission, the more he lost, the more he felt he had to continue. Quitting would mean admitting that all previous effort might have been for nothing, and that though it was unbearable to his pride. Daniel noticed the changes. Short replies, delayed calls, canceled plans, always with reasonable excuses. Daniel tried to talk gently, with understanding and kindness, without judgment. He spoke about balance, about limits, about knowing when to stop. Michael listened, but defended himself. Any advice felt like doubt in his ability. Fear of failure spoke louder than empathy. Over time, the friendship began to crack, quietly. No fights, no accusations, just absence. And absence, when prolonged, is one of the most silent forms of separation. Emily Carter, Michael's younger sister, watched everything with concern and quiet sadness. She knew her brother beyond achievements. She saw the exhaustion in his eyes, the tension in his shoulders, the emotional rigidity that didn't belong to who he once was. Emily deeply believed in compassion and had the sensitivity to recognize when someone was losing themselves. Unlike Daniel, Emily chose confrontation, not with aggression, but with truth. In a long conversation filled with care and affection, she asked a simple yet devastating question. "Michael, if all of this ends tomorrow, what's left of you?" The question wasn't financial. It was existential, and it hit a place Michael had been avoiding. He answered with plans, projections, and possible recoveries. He spoke a lot, but didn't answer. Emily noticed. So she told him a story about someone who insisted so much on not losing that they ended up losing everything. She spoke about forgiveness, reconciliation with oneself, and the wisdom of accepting limits before it's too late. Michael listened in silence, but he wasn't ready yet. Sometimes, the truth needs time to hurt enough. As the business sank deeper, Michael grew harder. Not out of cruelty, but exhaustion. He began treating relationships like resources. Conversations turned into meetings. Friendships became distractions. Anything that didn't directly contribute to saving the business felt like wasted time without realizing it. He was dehumanizing himself in the name of an ideal that no longer made sense.
Caring for someone who refuses care has an emotional cost. Daniel believed in the power of kindness, but also in healthy boundaries. So he slowly stepped back, not out of anger, but self-preservation. Michael interpreted the distance as abandonment. He never considered that it might be the consequence of his own choices. That blindness is common when someone is trapped in the mindset of "I've invested too much." That night, surrounded by numbers and unpaid bills, Michael felt something that didn't fit in spreadsheets. Loneliness. Rock bottom rarely announces itself. It doesn't come with drama or a single catastrophic event. More often, it shows up as accumulated exhaustion, sleepless nights, and the feeling of running without moving forward. That's how it happened for Michael. One investor quietly walked away. Another demanded impossible results. Debts piled up, while hope shrank. Michael realized he no longer felt passion, only obligation. He kept working, not because he believed, but because he didn't know how to stop. Quitting felt more painful than continuing to lose. This is the most dangerous point of the sunk cost fallacy. When the pain of stopping seems greater than the pain of staying, but it's an illusion, one that charges silent, compounding interest. One night, sitting alone in his small office, Michael finally stopped. Not strategically, but from exhaustion. In that heavy silence, emotion hit. He realized he had bet everything trying to avoid loss, and in the process lost something far greater: himself. For the first time, he understood that persistence wasn't courage, it was fear. When things fall apart, loneliness becomes clearer. Michael noticed it when he looked at his phone and saw no messages, no friendly check-ins, no invitations, no genuine "how are you?" Not because people didn't care, but because he had slowly disappeared from their lives. He thought of Daniel, of the times his friend tried to talk with kindness, offering support without judgment. He remembered responding with impatience or silence. Empathy had been suffocated by pride and obsession. Shame hit harder than financial loss. Money can be rebuilt. Trust cannot always be. Michael understood something painful. The longer you persist in what doesn't work, the more people you push away without noticing. And when you finally stop, some connections may already be gone. That realization hurt more than failure itself. It took days for Michael to find the courage to call Daniel. He rehearsed explanations, excuses, long justifications. But when the call finally happened, he dropped them all. He spoke honestly about fear, pride, and getting lost, trying not to lose. Daniel listened in silence, a silence filled with understanding. He didn't interrupt or accuse. Listening without trying to win is one of the greatest acts of love and respect. When he finally spoke, his words were simple and deep. He talked about boundaries, affection, and how distance wasn't punishment. It was protection. Forgiveness didn't come instantly. It came as a process. Reconciliation doesn't erase the past, it reshapes the future. Something important was restored: their shared humanity. Michael realized asking for forgiveness didn't make him smaller. It made him stronger. After the business officially ended, Michael entered a quiet, rebuilding phase. No grand plans, no big promises, just the desire not to repeat the same mistakes. He reflected honestly on his choices and realized he had confused persistence with stubbornness and commitment with self-abandonment. Learning to quit was one of his hardest lessons, because quitting means accepting limits, accepting that not every investment must be recovered. Sometimes the real gain is stopping the loss. This understanding brought wisdom. Michael began asking, not only can this work, but is this worth the human cost? He started valuing small things again. Long conversations, slow walks, simple laughter, things that don't generate money, but generate meaning. Kindness returned to his routine, and slowly, life stopped feeling like a constant battle and became a possible path. Michael realized money was never the problem. The problem was the place it occupied in his decisions. Money is a tool, not a purpose. Projects fail, but people sustain. Real relationships remain when everything collapses. He began sharing his story, not as someone who won financially, but as someone who learned emotionally. His words moved people because they were real. They spoke of loss, but also growth, of love, affection, and the danger of turning people into means to an end. Michael's greatest achievement wasn't recovery. It was becoming more human. Someone who listens, who stops, who chooses better. Michael slowly understood that no major change happens all at once. It's built through small, invisible decisions made when no one is watching. His greatest battle was never with the market or investors. It was internal, between insisting to prove something or stopping to preserve what gave life meaning. He revisited moments when he could have stopped earlier. Ignored conversations, warnings disguised as advice, clear signs of emotional exhaustion. Pride spoke louder than wisdom. Fear of failure made him sacrifice love, affection, and presence. For the first time, he looked at himself with empathy, not punishment. He learned life demands coherence. Winning outside means nothing if you lose inside. Money can be rebuilt. Projects can restart. Time and people often can't. That was his greatest lesson. Living ice and tea. Insisting at any cost. It is choosing wisely what deserves to stay. Life rarely charges immediately. It lets you accumulate, insist, justify, hope a little more will fix everything. And when it finally charges, the payment isn't money. It's time, relationships, versions of yourself left behind. Quitting isn't failure. Sometimes insisting is what destroys you. Michael learned love isn't an obstacle. It's a foundation. Friends aren't distractions. They're anchors. Kindness, ignored, always charges interest. Forgiveness doesn't change the past, it frees the future. So, the real question isn't money or friends. It's this: what are you still holding on to just because you've invested too much? Who are you losing while trying not to lose? If this story moved you, share it. Someone might need the courage to walk away and finally start living.